When we talk about better data, we mean also a lot of things. Sometimes we simply mean more data, because there are many areas where we just don't have the basic information yet. In the traditional area like economic and development and so, we have a lot of information. But even in social and environmental areas, we don't have the basic data, for instance, on biodiversity or so new areas. Or how do we measure good governance is also a challenge, and so on and so forth. So better data sometimes means also more data in the sense of covering more areas, and so that we understand what is going on in these important domains. Then often it also means we mean more disaggregated data. We don't only want to have one number for a whole country or so. We need to have the information really at the micro level now. We need to know where people are left behind, who has difficulties accessing a school or accessing health services. So it really has to be locally disaggregated. And
so you mean, for instance, that we move from the country level to the county and even down to a village level?
Exactly.
So we know which village.
That's correct.
And in some countries we don't yet know that? Is that data that's missing?
In some countries the integration between statistical and geospatial information, which is one of my favorite topics, has not yet progressed as far as I think it can. There are dangers to that. Also, we have to be very careful. I mean, because the further you disaggregate data, the further you get into the domain of violating somebody's data privacy. But it is very important that we have very exact information at the lowest level. I mean, how far are the schools from the children in a particular area, and do we need to organize transportation or something like that? And even the distance sometimes is to be measured precisely, because if the school is just on the other side of a river, it may seem that the school is only a few meters away, but if the next bridge is a couple of kilometers down, we need to be very precise on how we describe this. The child will have to walk perhaps 2 or 3 kilometers to get to school. So I think having better data in all of these senses and very precise is critically important without violating somebody's privacy, as I said.
So what would be the biggest impediment, or to put it another way, where is biggest room for improvement in terms of use of data or availability of data?
I mean, for me, it's always bringing different data sources together. I mean, so far, and this is the spirit of this World Data Forum, I mean, there is a lot of information out there, but it's in different hands, obviously. Sometimes it is already in the hands of the government, because the government has collected it through statistical methods like a survey or a census, or it is in the government's hand because of administrative records and so. But there's also a lot of information in the hand of the private sector. People have mobile phones. The way that they move or do not move is often captured by their cell phones. So a private telephone company may have much more information on the citizens and how they move from one place to the other, what things they purchase, and so, because they do it by paying with their phone and so on and so forth. So the private sector has information, and of course citizens themselves have a lot of information. Now, how do we bring all of this together? This is why we have this World Data Forum. We need to work out cooperation agreements, who gets what from whom, when, on which, and this can be quite complicated, as I said, because on the one hand we are having the public utility of data and use of data. On the other hand, we always have to bear in mind the right of the individual to protect their privacy. And so we must have information for public governance, but we must not violate an individual who does not necessarily want to or need to reveal all the details about themselves.
So it's cooperation both within countries, between the different actors, and then also between countries, right?
Absolutely. I think between countries, there are 2 dimensions here. One is we can learn from each other. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, to give you a concrete example, I mean, telephone companies that I just mentioned that are an important data source. There are certain countries have figured out an agreement with telephone companies. The telephone companies also don't want to give the government all the information, because then they lose their competitive advantage. I mean, this is customer information and so on. So can we find agreements that at a certain aggregate level information is exchanged? And if a government has figured out a way how to sign an agreement with a private company, the other governments around the world don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I mean, sharing experiences, sharing good practices is critically important. That's one way how countries can and need to work together. Another one is to really simply exchange data and work together on data, because there are increasingly phenomena that are not only limited to one country. I mean, migration. I mean, trade is the classical one, because I mean, it's cross-border migration, and so climate information, many of the environmental information is not limited to one country. So we need to get countries, mostly countries that are neighboring countries, really to come together and work on certain phenomena together, agree on data protocols, on standards, and how things are measured and when they are measured and by whom. So I think we are talking in an increasingly globalized world for an increasingly important business case for working on data together.
Great. Thank you.